Nezarec Sin. In today's build, Infinite Volatile. In today's build, we're going to be going over the Infinite Volatile Nezarec Sin build for Season 20. Let's take a look at the exotic armor piece. Nezarec Sin is the exotic warlock helmet that has the perk Abyssal Extractors. Void damage kills increase ability energy recharge rate. The description of the perk doesn't really provide much insight into its actual data. The way this actually works is that any void kills, weapons, and abilities proc the Abyssal Extractors buff for 2.5 seconds. This can max out at 20 seconds, and you can keep this extended at max duration if you get further ability or weapon kills. When this perk is active, you gain 300% additional base grenade and melee regeneration rate, as well as an additional 200% base class and super regen rate. What this is doing is multiplying the base cooldown, which is what Bungie uses when you see cooldown changes in patch notes or TWABs. So it's tripling what the cooldown rate of tier 3 is. Let's take a look at an example here. I put on basic legendary gear that has no mods and sort of tanks my stats, and I'll throw away all my abilities and start killing enemies to proc Abyssal Extractors. You'll see even with no mods active, I'm getting lots of ability recharge rate and super gains. We see the Void Weapon times 3 buff on the side of our HUD, but that's an artifact mod, and we'll get into that later. It's also sort of hard to avoid the Void Soul going out to targets, but it's all part of the class. We'll get an idea of the super cooldown as well here. I'm killing ads, and I'm not really trying to blitz through this, and my super is full in about a minute, with moderate ad density. And I'm not really fragging at a high pace here, but you can see that I'm stacking the buff up. I am getting Devour naturally because I did happen to get a Void ability kill, which was the Child of the Old Gods, which is kind of hard to avoid, but that's actually a good thing for this class, or subclass I should say. So we'll take a look here at a little bit more footage of the gameplay going out. You see the Void Soul fly out, and the Void Soul is going to start draining those enemies. We'll explain that a little bit more when we get into the aspect, because that's built into the build, is part of the aspect that we're going to be having work for us in our favor. You see a couple more ads killed here. Chain reaction from the Graviton Lance. We have a Void Breach and an Orb that we pick up. I'll throw a suppressor nade just to kind of throw out some more volatile and weakening effect for the build. And you can see my super is full. Like I said, I'm not really trying to frag out here, and the super's full. I'll kill a few more things here just so we can kind of see when this Abyssal Extractors is going, how we're chaining it. Almost hit max stacks there. We're about a quarter into the super, and I've maybe killed 4 things so far. So that gives you a really good idea of how valuable this perk actually is, because like I said, this is no mods. This is just the exotic helmet. Now let's take a look at the aspects. I was mentioning that a little bit earlier, but the first one I want to talk about is Feed the Void. Feed the Void gives us Devour when we kill a target with a Void ability. When Devour is active, it provides full health restore on final blows and extends Devour, and it grants you grenade energy. So Abyssal Extractors is going to work hand in hand with Devour. Devour is going to give us grenade energy when we get kills, and then Abyssal Extractors is going to provide ability energy for all of our abilities and even our super as well. We're then going to pair Devour with the Child of the Old Gods aspect, which provides a Void Soul when we cast our Rift. Then, when we damage a target, the Void Soul flies out and starts draining them. This does 2 things. It weakens the target with a 15% debuff, and while it's draining that enemy, it provides us grenade and melee energy when paired with the healing rift that we'll be running on this build. So then, when you defeat the target who is being drained by your Void Soul, that's going to grant you class ability energy. So on top of the Abyssal Extractors and on top of Devour, you also have Child of the Old Gods synergizing and feeding you more energy, while also debuffing and weakening targets to help you kill them more easily. The next thing we're going to talk about are the fragments we'll be using in this build to synergize with the exotic helmet. The first fragment we're running is a new one we just received with the release of Lightfall, Echo of Cessation. Anytime you kill a volatile debuff target, it will create a Void Breach. You can see the Void Breach here on the screen. What a Void Breach does is it provides class ability energy. I killed both of those targets who were volatile, and I have a Void Breach here. I'm going to pick up this Void Breach, and you'll get an idea of how much energy I'm going to receive to my class ability. The other important thing that this fragment does is when you perform a finisher, enemies that are in the area will become volatile. And then we have Echo of Starvation, where when we get this Void Breach or Orb picked up, it extends Devour. Take a look here. My Devour timer is ticking down, and I pick up the Void Breach, and it extends my Devour. And then as the Devour is ticking away, it's about to expire, and then I pick up an Orb of Power, and I get an extension on Devour. Our third fragment is Echo of Undermining. Our Void Grenade weakens targets. I really enjoy pairing this with the Suppressor Nade because there's nothing better than having a big major target weakened and suppressed at the same exact time, because he's weakened, and if I don't happen to have my Void Soul out and it's hitting a different target, I know that my Suppressor Nade is not only going to suppress the target and keep him from firing, it's also going to weaken him. And as you can see, I suppressed him with the first nade, and by the time I got another one, he was about to be able to start shooting me, I suppressed him again. And lastly is Echo of Persistence, because picking up a Void Breach as well as another orb or getting another kill will keep our Devour maxed out with a 50% increase up to 15 seconds, because sometimes you have high health targets that take longer to kill, and you want to be able to keep that Devour up, as well as be able to pick up the Orbs of Power, which only grant an additional 5 seconds, and a Void Breach grants an additional 5 seconds as well. We'll move on next to talk about our helmet armor mods, what we're going to be using here on our helmet. We are going with 2 copies of Harmonic Siphon. Our Harmonic Siphon is going to provide Orbs of Power when we get Rapid Void Weapon Final Blows, and that's going to feed into our Orbs of Power that we're going to get, which is going to help our Super Regenerate, as well as help us keep Volatile Flow active, as well as also keep our Devour extended, and then additionally 1 copy of Ashes to Assets. Here's a couple of examples of why we're only running 1 copy of Ashes to Assets. Because we have Devour, we have High Grenade Energy Uptime, as well as having Abyssal Extractors, but you can see here in the footage that it does help to have 1 copy. On our arms, we're rocking 1 copy of Firepower, which gives an Orb of Power when you secure a kill with your grenade final blows. The orb can give super energy, also provide us with more Devour uptime. We're also running Font of Focus. We'll get a bonus to Discipline when we pick up an Orb of Power, because that will give us an armor charge. When this buff is active, we'll get a passive increase to Discipline, and the armor charge ticks away. But at last, we'll also have 1 copy of Grenade Kickstart. When we throw a grenade, we'll get a small bump to grenade energy, and it will consume an armor charge, but provide us additional grenade energy while that armor charge is ticking down and slowly expiring. This mod just fits into the build, but there's the case that this is a bit overkill and could be swapped out for another mod like Impact Induction, or maybe another copy of Firepower. One important thing to note is that the Font of Discipline buff will also synergize with our leg mods that we'll discuss in a moment here, because when we get the armor charge and it ticks down, it is a shared cooldown for both the Weapon Surge and the Discipline. Next are our chest mods. Let's take a look here at what we have. On my robe, I'm running 1 Concussive Dampener. This is to reduce area of effect damage from combatants that we'll be having incoming at us. It's very important to have max resilience in this build, because max resilience is a 30% damage reduction buff flat out in the game, and then 1 copy of Charged Up, so we're able to carry an additional armor charge, which helps give the build some flexibility when we're working with these Orbs of Power. We want to be able to carry as many armor charges as possible to extend the amount of uptime that we have on Font of Discipline, as well as our Weapon Surge that we'll show next here on our leg armor mods. So for our leg mods, we're going to be stacking surges with stacks on stacks. So we're double dipping onto what we're doing here. We're going to have 2 copies of Void Weapon Surge, and I've got some stats up on the screen here to give you an explanation of the Void Weapon Surge. Void Weapon Surge is a mod that states your void weapons gain a small bonus to damage while you have any armor charge. the armor charge will now decay over time. As you can see on the screen, Void Surge times 1 is 10%, Void Surge times 2 is 17%. I've kept it here because I don't feel like the diminishing return of only 5% is anything you really need to go out of your way to give up running stacks on stacks. We'll be debuffing a lot of targets with our Child of the Old Gods, as well as our volatile rounds that we'll have on our weapons, so it's really important that we stack those Void Surges. And then we use stacks on stacks to where when we do get the armor charge from the orb pickup, it's going to extend how much we're able to have flexibility in our build to have this weapon surge last longer. So the next thing that we're going to look at is going to be our bond, where we're running a copy of a few interesting mods here that synergize with everything else that we've shown. We're going to be running one copy of Bomber. Bomber states here that it reduces grenade cooldown when using your class ability, so that's going to be something that we're going to be getting a lot of because of the Void Breaches, as well as the Child of the Old Gods. Then we also have 2 copies of Time Dilation. This mod states that your decaying armor charge has a longer duration, so this is going to increase the amount of time that we have for our Void Weapon Surge buff that's on our legs, as well as the Font of Discipline buff that we have on our arm mod. So one important thing that I mentioned previously is that they synchronize. So when you are picking up the orbs and you get the armor charge, it's going to give you the Void Weapon Surge and the Font of Discipline buff, and they're going to be used at the same time. They run off of the same charge, so you're not sacrificing for one over the other. What you're really going to be looking at here when we pick up this orb is we get the armor charge. It starts ticking at 18 seconds, and you can see on the screen improved ability regeneration. And when this Devour buff goes away, you'll see our Void Weapon boost times 2. That's our Void Weapon surge of that 17% damage bonus. We went through the first charge of 18 seconds, and now we're about to go through the second charge of 18 seconds. So that right there is 36 seconds of a 17% Void Weapon damage bonus and grenade regeneration. In this next clip coming up, you'll see my Taipan dealing increased weapon damage when I have 4 stacks of armor charge. 4 stacks of 18 seconds is a total of 72 seconds. So if a teammate drops a Well of Radiance and you get 3 orbs, you're going to have 54 seconds of uptime on the Void Weapon boost and grenade recharge rate. All of that seems very powerful, but we're going to add on to that with our artifact mods. And the first mod we're running is pretty simple. It's just Anti-Barrier Pulse, and volatile rounds can pierce barrier champions, but we're also going to run authorized mods Void. This allows the leg armor mods Void Weapon Surge to stack into our slots and fit into the build. We're also going to have one additional copy of it, so this fits well because it reduces the cost. Otherwise it would cost 6 energy to run the 2 copies that we're running in our build. So this is important because the whole build is focused around having our Void Weapons buffed by these mods. Then we also have that 1 copy of authorized mods Grenade that just allows us to throw in that Kickstart mod. So that's somewhat important because it does help synergize with the build and create a little bit of a flow state that we have with our ability uptime. But the next one that we're going to talk about is going to be very important, Volatile Flow. Volatile Flow states that upon picking up an Orb of Power will grant volatile rounds to our Void Weapons. We can see just how potent this perk is when it's paired with everything else that we have in our build. And as previously mentioned, volatile rounds can pierce barrier champions' shields. I'll let the footage here speak for itself to show you how potent the Volatile Flow mod can be when we have these volatile rounds. Our other mod in column 3 of the artifact is Shatter Orbs, where upon breaking a combatant's shield with a matching damage type, you'll create an Orb of Power. This perk can generate a lot of orbs for this build. Since you're matching the damage type, you get a Chain Explosion. In the 4th column is Bricks from Beyond. This is why I've opted out of any Finder mods with this build, because Bricks from Beyond says that when you defeat powerful combatants with Void Weapons, it has a chance to generate heavy ammo for you and your fire team. But with our primary exotic, you'll see we can generate ammo quite easily. Look here, I have a clip that shows the Witch Queen campaign, which is -15, and I'm killing some enemies with Collective Obligation, and you'll see an ammo brick drop over there. And the icing on the cake is the last perk, Void Weapon Channeling. When we defeat a target with a Void Weapon and we have at least 1 Void ability fully charged, we will gain a bonus to Void Weapon damage. This buff stacks based on the number of Void abilities, and yes, the super counts as an ability. Here's an example to show you how it works. In this next clip, I kill one harpy with my void weapon, and because I have my super, my grenade, and my rift, I'll get a void weapon boost times 3. And this is great. This just works in the background. You don't even have to think about it. It's just going to be there. The next thing we'll take a look at is the kinetic weapon that we're pairing in this build. I've been running Riptide, and it's hard to pry this from many of the builds just because it can handle slowing overloads to stun them and shattering unstoppables to stun them. It's also really nice just to freeze a high health target. It puts out good damage close up when you're going in for orbs of power to extend your Devour and proc Volatile flow. In the energy slot, we've been kind of split between a couple of weapons here. Initially, this build started out with using Graviton Lance, which provides great AoE damage upon getting a kill, which helps generate those void projectiles of the Cosmology perk. The Cosmology void projectiles will be volatile as well, ever since Bungie reworked this weapon back in Witch Queen. It also has Vorpal Weapon and Turnabout on the Catalyst, which are good all-around utility perks to help you deal more damage and have more survivability. With the removal of Match Game, I felt that Turnabout is an underrated perk, and because it's not taking up a perk on the gun and it's intrinsic, it works out quite well here. The other weapon I've been split on is Collective Obligation. This weapon has Umbral Sustenance, where when we get a kill with Devour active, it'll automatically reload. And then it has the intrinsic trait Void Leech, where we'll leech void debuffs like Volatile, Weaken, and Suppression. Then when we charge it up, we can swap to the firing mode, spread the suppression effect of our Void Grenade, as well as that Weaken effect from our Void Soul and Echo of Undermining Fragment. It does feel a bit overkill for the build, but the different fire rate can help out when you need to set up faster kills instead of the slower rate of Graviton's firing. One thing to note is because you can leech the suppression effect, you'll see here in the clip that you can switch to the alternate firing mode and stun both barrier and overload champions depending on if you have them stored with the Void Leech. You'll see in the clip we suppress the overload without the use of our suppressor grenade. One other weapon we've been flexing in and out of the build is the Velis X Ritual Pulse from Season 19. With Repulsor Brace and Golden Tricorn, you'll be able to get a Void Overshield on Void debuff targets that you kill with this weapon. And we'll spam Volatile rounds, so we'll get that a lot. And that does synergize with Echo of Persistence because it's a Void Overshield. And then Golden Tricorn will synergize with all the ability kills that we'll be getting to get a nice damage bonus on this weapon. I've mainly been running this in lower tier content because it feels like the PvP and PvE range nerf affected it a little bit too much. Because that frees up our exotic weapon slot, I've chose to use Leviathan's Breath, which also got another buff and deals more damage to champions. It's great to also stun lock certain bosses, and you can see in the clip here when I shoot this shot how much damage it does to a weakened target. It's kind of impressive. So the good thing about this is that it does provide a little bit more survivability because while we're also proccing Devour on the kills that we're getting, if they're debuffed with one of the Void debuffs, whether it's Suppression, whether it's Weaken, whether it's a Volatile Flow kill that we're getting from our gun, it is going to give us that Overshield, and it all synergizes quite nicely. But I feel like it's just a little bit slow firing and the range feels odd. It isn't a primary exotic, so it doesn't deal as much to the red bars. And finally, we're going to talk about our heavy weapon slot. We've ran a few different weapons just depending upon the encounters that you're in. And a good weapon for solo content is the new seasonal heavy void grenade, Fragment. It comes with spike grenades, auto-loading holster, and explosive light. But if you're going to be running in a team environment where you'll set up in a well or stick close together with your fire team for damage, I would definitely say go with the Tape-Hand with triple tap and firing line. My Stinger got hit with a nerf, but I've still managed to have it proc quite a bit because of triple tap. You're keeping your ammo firing for quite a while on a target, so you have quite a few chances for it to proc. One other honorable mention is the Red Herring from last year's Witch Queen expansion with enhanced field prep and frenzy. Good choice there. And here's just an example of the gameplay loop. We're killing a couple adds, we have the Void Leech charge, we have Devour up, our Void Soul's out. We've got Abyssal Extractors procced, it's almost maxed out. I've generated 2 orbs, I've got a Void Breach here, I'm going to pick that up, extend my Devour, pick up an Orb of Power, get Volatile rounds on my weapon, cast my Rift, send out my melee to spread some more volatility out on the field. I just start slaying out here, I'm going to throw a Suppressor Grenade, and I'm going to suppress a lot of enemies. I see an Unstoppable over there, but I'm just going to keep focusing on what I'm doing and get rid of a lot of these adds that are trying to target me down. Throw out another grenade already. We've got another Void Breach over there. We pull out the Riptide, we stun the Unstoppable champion, then we're going to melt him down, get our Devour back, and we have our super. So next up, if I see any big health targets, we're going to throw out the super, and there we go. Throw out that super. That's essentially just the gameplay loop. Just slay out, kill ads. Everything's going to die. Everything's going to be volatile. Thank you guys all for watching. I appreciate your viewership. If you like this build, give it a try if it looks really entertaining, and let me know what you think in the comments of this build. Thank you guys all for watching. Peace.